Hello, everyone. Hot Topic Tuesday on League of Leaders. I'm Zach Sooty. We have Al Fragnoli and Brandon Gunn. We have a few topics we want to get through tonight. A lot going on, but we want to talk about a sensitive subject, something that a lot of people saw over the weekend, and that was Christian Eriksen, Danish footballer, collapsed. He received 13 minutes of CPR on the field. They eventually had to use an AED on him. Team doctor was quoted as saying he was gone. What are your thoughts when something happens to such a young guy, Al?
Yeah, so that was a scary, scary situation that we witnessed over the weekend, and I was actually talking on the phone with my father as I had turned on the soccer game, which I rarely watch soccer unless it's the World Cup or the Euro Cup, which we got going on right now. So I just happened to tune in before I was going to do some work around the house, and about 5 minutes after watching it, I saw Christian Eriksen collapse on the field there, and he is one of Denmark's best players. Zach, as you mentioned, 29 years old, such a young age. And then, the camera was on him the entire time, which was a scary situation too. I wish they would just went away because you could see that he was obviously in some massive distress there. And as you mentioned, they had to bring the defibrillator out there and revive him, and thankfully they did. But it did not look good. At first, you could see them giving him chest compressions that were not working. They were working on him feverishly for a couple minutes before they were able to revive him. But just a scary scene, and obviously you're glad that he's okay right now or getting better. He's still in the hospital by what it sounds like, but having a heart attack at such a young age and almost losing your life right there is definitely very scary, and it just shows you that life is so fragile. And you definitely hope the best for him. He's an outstanding soccer player. As I mentioned, probably one of the best on that Denmark squad. And I don't think he'll play again. I find that hard to believe that he'd be able to play soccer again at a competitive level, but you just hope that he lives a very healthy and normal lifestyle. It reminds me a lot of, as Red Wing fans, I'm sure we all remember Yuri Fisher back in 2005. I was actually at that hockey game as well when he collapsed on the bench and they had to revive him too. But just a scary situation overall. Brandon, your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I was not watching the game live. I mean, I can't even imagine what that scene was like as it took place. But one thing I'll say is trying to find the positive in it. Hats off to the first responders that brought him back. I mean, you think about the Yuri Fisher situation that you referenced. I was watching that game live, and you hear about these other situations. Jay Bouwmeester, like we were talking about earlier too. All three of them are success stories in that they were able to come back and hopefully lead a normal life, even if it is outside of athletics. So hats off to the first responders. It had to have been a tough scene, and you got to feel for the guys and the teammates that are losing a great player and a good friend in the locker room and things like that. But I would also like to piggyback on that and just say I did find it kind of curious that the match did resume. I guess both teams gave their blessing to do so, but I thought that was an interesting move by the league after such an intense situation happened. So, like I said, I like to focus on the first responders because I think that that's the positive in the story. Zach, what do you think about it?
I agree with you, Brandon. I think the first responders, they're at every game, and how often do they need to be called upon? But when they do, it's typically a big moment, and this was of the biggest moments. So I think that was kudos to them. They're how they acted to have a save. They saved a life. But it's also concerning, what's the reason? Why did it happen to Christian Eriksen? And I think even he himself is wondering, and he's going to look for answers and find out why that happened. What was it? Something a birth defect that something he's had since he was born? Was it talks of he never tested positive or had symptoms of COVID, but could it have been COVID related somehow? He's asking those questions and he wants to know. So I think it'll be interesting to see if he shares that with everyone to find out what the cause of that was. But I was not watching the game, and I want to say I was fortunate to not watch the game, but Unfortunately, as I scrolled through Twitter, it did come up, and I did see it at a quick glance. Didn't want to watch it again. The way he collapsed looked like his eyes were still open. It was just something that I wasn't comfortable watching. Didn't want to watch it again, so scrolled right by it. So glad to hear he's okay. But that's something you never want to see. But hope that he's on the road to recovery and can live a normal life. And whether or not he can play sports, I think is secondary at this point. It's about his health overall. So, all right, gentlemen, going to the Stanley Cup Finals. We're now down to the Final Four. Al, who do you got?
For me, Tampa Bay, Vegas, as simple as that. I know that's the sexy pick right now. Everybody thinks that's going to happen. I don't see Montreal finding a way to get over Vegas. I think they're too strong. I picked them at the start of the postseason. I know I went back and forth with Colorado, but we're going to stay with Vegas here. All right. And then in Tampa Bay and the New York Islanders there, I think that has the potential to be a good series. But I think Tampa is going to have a little bit too much for them. I know they lost game 1 already and they're down 1-0, but I still look for Tampa to rebound. Ultimately, I got Tampa and Vegas, and I'm going to stick with Vegas winning it. And my pre-postseason pick is going to stick with Marc-Andre Fleury. Zach, your favorite NHL hockey player to win the Conn Smythe. Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going chalk as well here. I think just Vegas has too much for Montreal. Tampa Bay has too much for the Islanders, I believe. But what I'd like to also say here is this shows the parity in the NHL. I mean, you think about the playoffs and, how many rounds have we written off Montreal up to this point? How many rounds have we written off New York, the Islanders up to this point? This is why I love the NHL playoffs. I feel like anybody does have an equal footing. Even if you're out skilled, you can game plan around that. And it's not always a shoe-in that, the top seed in both conferences are going to line up when it comes to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, but I do think in this case that, Vegas is just too skilled for Montreal and that Tampa is just too deep for the Islanders. Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go against your calls there. I'm going to go with the Islanders. I said if they got it past the Penguins, they're going to wreak havoc, and they've done exactly that. And I don't think it's going to end. I think they're going to, and I think they're going to make it to the finals. But Al, you said it. I'm a Marc-Andre Fleury fan. I'm going to be rooting for those Vegas Golden Knights, and I think that they will win it all. Especially if they're meeting the Isles. I don't think it'll be much of a contest at that point. But I'm sticking with Vegas and the Islanders. Wish it was Vegas and Penguins. Penguins couldn't get past the Islanders though, so I'm going to stick with the Islanders. All right, gentlemen. College football is looking to expand their playoffs to 12 teams. Al, what are your thoughts on this as they vote, I believe, next week?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love it. I mean, very simple. I love it. I think everybody knew this would eventually happen. It's not going to happen, obviously, this season. Probably won't happen next season by what I've read and observed. So you're probably looking at the 2023 season. But I am all for it. I love it. It's going to get some teams in there that, probably have 2 losses, some maybe Big Ten schools or SEC schools that have had a tough schedule that they've played. It's going to create more of a desire for some of these bigger programs to go out and play strong competition. I know some schools already do it at the start of the season, non-conference wise, but I think you're going to start seeing some schools get away from, in Ohio State going and playing Toledo or something like that. You're going to see more marquee matchups early on before the conference schedule starts. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's what everybody wants to see. But I think with the expansion to 12 teams, some of those Big Ten and those SEC schools, if they have 1 loss early on in the season, they're not going to, feel like their season's over, looking to get into the postseason. So I think it's great. Don't be surprised if you see 4 schools from the SEC some years make it in, but hey, best 12 teams, get them in there, let them compete, let them play. And it'll be a really, really exciting time for college football. And I think that that's going to be fantastic to look ahead at that. It'll be interesting to see what some of the teams and schools do in regards to some of these student athletes getting paid for their likeness and things. I think that's going to be more of a something to watch out for, with these teams getting more household names out there, more publicity and national attention. But I think it's good all around for college football, for fans, for everybody involved. Brandon?
So I'm torn on it. If it plays out as you talked about, where, maybe we get a better product at the end of the season, then I think that then I'll be on board with it. There's nothing better than playoffs. We just talked about the parity in the NHL. If we can get some high seed football teams losing out and just not have the normal run of Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State every year, then I'm up for it. The one thing that I do feel like it's getting away from, though, is I feel like the college football season as a whole was its own playoff, much like you alluded to, Al. That early loss, it could kill you. So it forced you to bring your best every week. And if you didn't, you could pay dearly for it. And so that, I feel like we're getting away from that, which, that is one of the things that I thought was really unique to college football. Any other sport, you can lose a game and come back the next week and give it your all, and you're normally still in the thick of things. But so that's the one thing where I'm a little torn on that. I do love football, though, so if it leads to more football, then that's great. I guess now I'm thinking of a landscape, though, and you gave a great example with the SEC. What are these conference championships worth now? Is that just a seeding maneuver? Or, if you know that you're in the SEC and it's a 1v2 conference championship game, you're both going anyways. Are we going to start seeing guys rest now? That's what I start to worry about, because, we're already starting to see in college football where some of the higher skilled guys, if you're not in the playoff but you're still in decent bowl, these guys are sitting down. So I'm wondering what happens to the product overall once we start to get there. And, important games like conference championships should be the best players on the field. But inevitably, I think that, Al, to your point, we did see this coming. We started off with 4. 12, is 16 too far away? That's what I see kind of happening. And then along with 16, are we going to start seeing consolidation of the conferences? There are so many different things and so many different ways that college football could go. And I'm really curious with the players starting to be able to benefit off of their likeness. Does going to a Big Ten that's going to be more monetized or have the ability to monetize somebody's name, is that going to draw people there? So I think college football is in a really unique spot right now. I think the move to 12 could be good. I think I've got to sit on the sidelines and see what plays out in this first year before I ultimately figure out if I'm a fan of the move or not.
Well, Brandon, you sit on the sideline. You sit on the sideline and observe. I'm going to be all in, because this is going to be fantastic for every college football fan across America. It's going to be great. So stay positive. It's going to be awesome. You enjoy your sideline seat. I'm going to be right there.
I
Zach?
hope so.
So I'll be on the sideline with Brandon. I think I'm excited about 12 teams, but he brought up some great points, and I'm worried about the unintended consequences. What's going to happen? Can they design roles to make sure that players aren't sitting? Our conference championship is going to be meaningful. Those are the things they need to think about when they're putting this in place. And I think it's great. I think it'll be fun, but there can be unintended consequences that, could just, devalue the product. And that's what we don't want. So that's just my thoughts on the 12 teams. I think it's going to be great to start, but I'm a little skeptical on what it may do to college football down the road. So we'll see. Sorry, Al. All right,
it's going to be fantastic.
Zach, I think you're dead on.
All right, Al. So we're going to stick with college football and the University of Michigan and the recent information that's coming out about their former team doctor. Countless players speaking out that Coach Bo Schembechler knew what was going on and refused to take action. Should the university remove his statue and change the name of Schembechler Hall? And how do we prevent these things from happening in the future? Some loaded questions there, Al. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is definitely a sensitive subject, as it should be, but should they remove his statue? Should they change the name of Schembechler Hall to something else? Yes, yes, they should. And that's coming from a University of Michigan supporter, a person who loves U of M athletics and has been a fan since early on in my childhood. And I don't remember Bo Schembechler as a coach. Obviously, I was too young to witness him on the sidelines there, but I had an opportunity to meet him when I was younger at a book signing, and it was a great experience for me as a young kid to meet him. A University of Michigan legend. So this information that's coming out is hard to digest by being a Michigan fan, but this goes deeper and it goes so far more than just supporting a football program. I believe that he 100% knew what was going on at the university. They have over 800 players, former players of his, that are speaking out and coming out. Think about the ones who still are embarrassed or ashamed or have that feeling of guilt from being molested by the team doctor, and they don't want to talk about it all these years later. So I think there's countless others that knew what happened was wrong and knew that Bo Schembechler knew something that was going on there. And some of the stuff that we're hearing right now is incredibly sad. Zach, you're familiar with this, being a Penn State fan, right? With years ago and everything that came out with Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno, and those were legends in their own right there at Penn State. And then you look at Larry Nazar and everything that happened with Michigan State's scandal several years ago. And it's my firm belief that everybody in that athletic department knew what was going on too. Tom Izzo being one of them. Brian Vanderkruisen, if you're listening, Tom Izzo knew. So this stuff isn't good, and it's going on at a lot of schools. What scares me and worries me is that it's probably happening at a lot of other institutions and a lot of other places, and we just don't know about it yet. So I think sometimes we see people in positions of authority that are sick and messed up and think they can get away with stuff like this. And it's a scary thing to see, because you're seeing grown men years later coming out, finally feeling comfortable talking about what happened to them. And this is something that sticks with an individual for their entire life. And somebody that is a leader like Bo Schembechler failed people. So I think that his statue should be removed. Everything about him should be removed from the University of Michigan. And how do we prevent it moving forward? I don't know. I mean, I think there needs to be strict consequences. You need to make sure that there's extensive background checks on all these high-ranking university and college employees that are in leadership roles. And you need to make sure that the people that you're hiring to coach these young men and women throughout their college journey, you have to make sure as an athletic director and as a university president that you're hiring the right person for each specific sport and each specific job. Because these individuals, if they hear something like this that happens, they have to totally feel comfortable coming out and speaking about it right away to prevent it from happening to more and more people. So again, a touchy subject. It's disappointing and disgusting to hear, and it's incredibly sad. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be in lockstep with you here, and it's really hard not to be. I mean, you look at the precedents that's already been set, as you referred to, at Penn State and Michigan State, and yeah, Bo was, I mean, probably very responsible, if not the sole man responsible for Michigan football being what it got to and where it is. But that doesn't change the fact. We started off tonight talking about Christian Eriksen and about how things are bigger than sports, and this is no different. We're talking about human lives that were affected, and hundreds of human lives at that. And I think that because of that, the names have to come off the buildings, and I don't think there's another course of action. In fact, being a Michigan supporter too, I'm sure you guys have seen when I've worn the Michigan shirts and things like that as we're recording. But their handling of the situation has been terrible at best. I just, I thought their statement was weak, referring to how long everybody's been passed away and the doctor has been passed away for this many years. And, it was almost like an excuse, or at least that's how I felt it. I felt like they were saying, hey, we're good now. I mean, it doesn't change the fact what happened and all of the disgusting acts that have taken place. Now, in terms of future prevention, I'm hoping if there's one good thing that comes out of social media and everybody having a computer in their pocket, I mean, you've got access to get news out into the world ASAP. I'm hoping that this can prevent, or the fear of that, I guess, access to getting information out so quickly. I'm hoping that prevents future people that would prey on children. Hey, they've got a phone in their pocket. Anything can bubble up pretty quickly. That's what I'm hoping. But furthermore, and Al, you talk about it too, I think that there needs to be recourse. Instead of things being swept under the rug, which has happened at all of these institutions, any and all accusations or any and all reports they all deserve a thorough investigation at a minimum. And if that were to happen, I believe that it would make people more confident in coming out. If every situation yielded a thorough investigation, and Al, to your point, with harsh penalties, then I think that could be enough to not subside everybody or prevent everybody, but maybe just a few more. What are your thoughts, Zach?
Heavy subject. Being from the southwestern Pennsylvania part of Pennsylvania, in the Southwest, being close to Penn State, being a fan of Penn State, watched all of this kind of happen there. It's disturbing. It's amazing that people with so much power got away with something so terribly wrong for so long, and there wasn't someone to speak up, someone that had the strength to and maybe they were just silenced, by the top brass, which is probably more likely. I don't know that for sure. As for, those, how the University of Michigan needs to handle this, I agree with it. Yeah, and I think Brandon, you agreed as well. Remove the statue, change the name. That needs to happen. How do we prevent things like this from happening? I don't know if you ever do, but you can prevent it from continuing to happen time and time again. It happens once, you report it, you investigate it, you make it stop. We need individuals to be upstandards, not bystanders. We need people to speak up, have a voice, and they need to be able to tell someone, and someone's going to go, if they need the confidence that someone wants to report something and they need a friend and ally, then we need to be there to support those individuals. This can't happen. It can't continue to happen. And, the excuses from the University of Michigan stating, that the doctor's no longer around and the people involved, that trauma is real. That trauma is never going away. That trauma affects their families. So there needs to be consequences for it. And, the excuses they're making, one of my favorite sayings is who's good at making excuses is seldom good for anything else. So man up, take accountability, and let's right the wrong as best we can. But more importantly, let's make sure that we speak up and help any individuals that need to speak up. So, and again, I think it goes into, background checks, recruiting, but you could hire someone at a very young age and they could develop issues throughout their careers. So there needs to be check-ins, there needs to be progress. Just because someone got hired 30 years ago doesn't mean there was some sort of development within that time that caused them to have an episode that would cause this type of behavior. So I think there just needs to be more accountability on the university, and to those kids, they need to be taught that they can come to someone, that they have an opportunity to speak. And thorough investigations, they absolutely need to be done, and they need to be done by a third party. It needs to be done by someone outside of the NCAA, and someone who's going to be, not have bias towards, those in charge, and get to the truth. And I think that's probably, a whole nother discussion on how that should be handled, but I think there are ways to make it, you're not going to make it stop, but I think you can make it stop before it affects more than one person. So once it happens, we have a right to make it stop. So that's my opinion. Pretty passionate about it, and hopefully University of Michigan begins to do the right thing. All right, gentlemen. Just the other week, we talked about unruly fans at sporting events, and just the other day during an altercation between Kevin Durant and PJ Tucker, and Nets security guard comes out on the court and bumps PJ Tucker, almost trying to break up this, this swarm of, or whatever you would want to call it. The NBA suspended the security guard for the remainder of the games in Milwaukee, and he's not allowed near the court at Nets games for the remainder of the series. What are your thoughts on this incident, Al? And was the punishment severe enough?
Yeah. So interesting points there with that. I looked into this a little bit more because it sounds confusing when you sit there and you think, why is a Brooklyn Nets security guard even at a Milwaukee Bucks game? But he is from my understanding, a personal security guard for Kevin Durant as well, which is why he was at that game. So to answer some of the questions that you pointed out there, I don't think the NBA did enough on this. I mean, when you go and look at the replays, I mean, he came out there like sprinting on, it looked like, and a really, really aggressive, strong shoulder bump to PJ Tucker there. So that should never happen by a grown adult. I mean, what are we doing? So I think the NBA should have been a little bit more harsh as they came down on this gentleman, maybe suspended him for the remainder of the series. I mean, but he's just not allowed at what game? He wasn't allowed at game 4, which they've already played. So now they go back to Brooklyn and he can just start working again. He just can't be close to the court. But I mean, what good is that? So you essentially suspended the guy for 1 game, and when he goes back to Milwaukee, he won't be there for game 6. So 2 games he's suspended for. I don't know. To me, I would get rid of him for the rest of the series, and you really have to have a strong discussion with him on his actions and what he did, and that stuff can't happen moving forward. So I thought that the NBA failed in that situation. I thought they were pretty weak on their assessment there. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, I just thought it was such a strange scene. As you see, you don't normally see that. So I've got a couple of questions that I have yet to see answered anywhere. But I agree with you. I think that the series should have been about it there. Get him out of the series, and then, if he goes through some sort of training or what have you, then he can come back. And the only reason I think so is because it was a shoulder bump, but it wasn't anything that was going to hurt the player. So it was, a grown man bumping another grown man. I see your point there. I'm just curious. My own questions are, what role was described to him when taking the position that made him think, okay, this is my turn to tag in here? Like, I'm really curious, and I'd love to see that answer, because you just saw this guy coming flying from the sidelines. I had no idea who he was, only to read about that later. So I think that at very least he needs some additional training, and there needs to be some roles understood there, because it never should be his role to run onto the court and especially make contact with anybody. It's one thing if maybe you're getting in the middle or something like that and just kind of using yourself as a blockade. But I mean, if you start bumping people, pushing people, making contact, then you're opening yourself up to an altercation. And that's just not, I mean, that doesn't de-escalate anything, right? If you just look at his actions, did he escalate or de-escalate a situation? He escalated a situation, which, as a security guard or as somebody who should have a security presence, that's just not your role. So those were my thoughts. I think I would have been fine with the series and some additional training. The 1 game does seem kind of like an odd situation, but it wasn't egregious with an injury taking place. And I think that's maybe why I'm a little bit more okay with it than some of the recent situations we've seen. So what about you, Zach? What do you think?
I agree with you on what were his job expectations? What was his role? I mean, we all know what our job is, and we're faced with ethical decisions every day, no matter how small. Some are larger than others, but we're faced with ethical decisions, and what thought went through his mind to say, it's go time. I'm getting out there. I just thought that was so, I don't know any other word to describe it than interesting. I'd like to know the why. What made you think that was, you know, allowable? I mean, I just don't understand it. But I don't know if the NBA's punishment is going to be it. I think, whether he's employed by the Nets or, outside security company, I think there needs to be a little bit more, just like you said, training, probably some sort of written document that states, you do this again, you're done. I think there's probably more on the back end we may not know about. Maybe the NBA went easy on them because of that reason, that the employer is going to take some responsibility on that. But to the point of making that decision to say, I'm going to run out of the court, and I don't, again, escalate the situation. I mean, it wasn't de-escalating at all. So just a very interesting, situation, and don't understand it. Would like to know more and be in that room to ask him those questions to find out what he was thinking and why he thought that was the ethical thing to do. But to the point of, I hope it's not it from his employer. I'm hoping the NBA said, this is what we're going to do, and we expect you to follow up with a little bit more. So in that sense, hopefully it's enough. But if that's it, definitely not enough. There needs to be more of a punishment for that type of behavior. So, well, gentlemen, we talked about quite a few things, some loaded questions tonight. Appreciate everyone joining us, and if you can, please join us this weekend. We have a great guest coming up. And we also have Hot Topic Tuesday next week that we'll be excited to talk with all of you about. So enjoy, have a great night, and see you next time.